Two sisters, laughing and carefree, stepped out for ice cream on a sunny afternoon. By dusk, they were gone, vanished without a scream, leaving their family shattered. What happened in those fleeting hours at a bustling mall that no one saw coming? In a quiet suburb where kids played without fear, a darkness waited to steal it all away. And 32 years later, a single clue would unravel a truth so horrific it's almost unbelievable. Hey, don't forget to like. Please subscribe for more shocking crime stories and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. In the summer of 1985, Springfield, Illinois was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. Tucked between rolling cornfields and tree-lined streets, it was a postcard of small-town America. Families gathered for barbecues, kids raced bikes until the streetlights flickered on, and neighbors left their doors unlocked. The Parker family fit right into this idyllic scene, their modest two-story home on Elm Street buzzing with the chaos and warmth of raising three kids. Daniel Parker, a high school history teacher, was known for his dry humor and knack for storytelling, captivating his students as much as his own children during dinner table debates. His wife, Laura, was the glue of the family, balancing her part-time job at the local library with the endless demands of parenthood. Their kids, 17-year-old Ethan, 13-year-old Hannah, and 11-year-old Sophie, were as different as siblings could be, yet inseparable in their own way. Ethan, the eldest, was a junior with dreams of college football, spending his summers at the community field, tossing a ball with friends. Hannah, at 13, was the dreamer, always sketching in her notebook or sneaking novels from her mom's library stash. Sophie, the youngest, was a firecracker, bold, curious, and always trailing her big sister like a shadow. The two girls shared a bond that was the heartbeat of the Parker household. Hannah, with her quiet confidence, was Sophie's guide, while Sophie's infectious laughter could light up even the gloomiest days. As July 1985 rolled in, the family was buzzing with plans. Hannah's 14th birthday was just around the corner, and Sophie was counting down to turning 12. They'd been promised a big celebration, a joint party with cake, music, and maybe even a trip to the county fair. July 17, 1985, dawned warm and golden, the kind of summer day that begged to be spent outside. It was the middle of summer break, and the Parker house was alive with the usual morning chaos. Laura was in the kitchen flipping pancakes, while the kids bickered over who got the last of the orange juice. Ethan, ever the teenager, announced he was heading to the field for a pickup game with his buddies. "Don't be late for dinner," Laura called after him, her voice half lost in the clatter of dishes. Hannah and Sophie, meanwhile, had their own plans. They'd been begging to visit the Springfield Mall, a sprawling shopping center a mile from home. It wasn't just any mall. It was the place for kids their age, with its arcade, record store, and a new ice cream parlor that had the whole town talking. Laura, catching their excited whispers, smiled. "Why don't you grab some ice cream while you're there?" she suggested, handing each girl $5, a small fortune for two kids in 85. The girls' eyes lit up. Ice cream at Scoops and Swirls was the perfect treat, and the mall's summer displays, bright banners, and twinkling lights for the upcoming fair were an added draw. Laura set a firm rule: be home by 5 p.m. sharp. The girls nodded, all ready. Halfway out the door, their sneakers pounding the pavement as they headed down Elm Street. The sun was high, the air thick with the scent of cut grass, and the sisters' laughter echoed through the quiet streets. To anyone watching, they were just two kids enjoying a carefree summer day, but something was waiting at that mall, something that would turn this ordinary afternoon into the start of a nightmare that would haunt Springfield for decades. Hannah and Sophie reached the Springfield Mall just before noon. The place was alive, with a hum of shoppers, moms pushing strollers, teens loitering by the arcade, and retirees sipping coffee at the food court. The sisters wove through the crowd, their chatter bouncing between plans for their birthday party and which ice cream flavors to try. At Scoops and Swirls, they settled on a shared sundae, chocolate fudge for Hannah, strawberry for Sophie, giggling as they took turns with the spoon. A friend from school, 12-year-old Mia, spotted them near the mall's central fountain. They were sitting on a bench, the sundae melting between them, when a man approached. He wasn't the kind of person you'd notice right away. Average height, maybe in his 40s, with neatly combed hair and a gray polo shirt, he looked like any other dad at the mall. But he carried a Polaroid camera, the kind that spit out instant photos, and he had a story that made the girls' ears perk up. "I'm with a local magazine," he said, his voice smooth and friendly. "We're doing a feature on kids enjoying summer in Springfield. Mind if I snap a quick photo? You might see yourselves in print." Hannah hesitated, but Sophie, ever the extrovert, grinned and nodded. Their dad's history lessons often ended up in the local paper, so the idea of being in a magazine felt exciting, not strange. Mia watched as the man took a few shots, chatting with the girls about their favorite mall spots. He even let Sophie hold the camera, showing her how it worked. To Mia, he seemed harmless, professional even, but she noticed something odd. Kept glancing around like he was checking for onlookers. By early afternoon, he thanked the girls and walked off, his camera tucked under his arm. Mia didn't think much of it and headed to the arcade, leaving Hannah and Sophie to finish their ice cream. But the mall wasn't as safe as it seemed. Another figure was lurking that day, one who sent a chill down the spine of anyone who noticed: him. A teenage boy, maybe 18 or 19, was hovering near the fountain. He was lanky, with greasy dark hair and a faded denim jacket that looked out of place in the summer heat. His eyes were fixed on the crowd, but they kept drifting back to Hannah and Sophie. A group of girls nearby, including 14-year-old Emily, felt his stare too. It wasn't casual. It was intense, predatory, like he was sizing them up. Emily whispered to her friends, "That guy's giving me the creeps." When he followed them toward the record store, one of her friends snapped, "Why don't you just take a picture?" He didn't flinch, didn't look away, just kept staring, his lips curling into a faint smirk. Emily later told police she saw him watching the Parker sisters too, his gaze lingering longer than it should have. Around mid-afternoon, Ethan, the girl's older brother, swung by the mall to grab a soda from the food court. Through the glass window of Scoops and Swirls, he saw Hannah and Sophie still at their table, laughing over their empty sundae dish. They looked happy, normal, like any other day. He didn't stop to say hi, didn't want to cramp their style, but he'd later replay that moment in his mind, wishing he'd walked over. A short while later, a neighbor, Mrs. Carter, saw the sisters leaving the mall, walking along Oak Street toward home. They were side by side, talking animatedly, their voices carrying in the warm air. Nothing seemed wrong. They weren't running, weren't looking over their shoulders. They were just two girls heading home after a fun afternoon. But that was the last anyone saw of Hannah and Sophie Parker. By late afternoon, they had vanished into thin air. Back at the Parker house, 5 p.m. came and went. Laura glanced at the kitchen clock, her hands pausing over the cutting board where she was prepping dinner. The girls were never late, especially not when Laura had promised her famous lasagna. By 5:15, she was pacing, her eyes darting to the window, expecting to see Hannah and Sophie skipping up the driveway. The house felt too still, too empty without their chatter. At 5:30, she called Daniel at the school, where he was grading summer assignments. "They're not home yet," she said, her voice tight. Daniel tried to stay calm. "They probably got caught up at the mall. You know how they love that place." But Laura's gut told her otherwise. These weren't girls who ignored rules. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. By 6 p.m., Laura couldn't wait any longer. She grabbed her keys and drove to the mall, scanning the parking lot, the food court, the arcade, anywhere the girls might be. The sundae dish was still on the table at Scoops and Swirls, but Hannah and Sophie were nowhere to be found. Daniel joined her, and together they combed every corner of the mall, calling out their names until their voices grew hoarse. By 7 p.m., they were back home, and Laura was on the phone with the Springfield Police Department, her hands shaking as she reported her daughters missing. The officer on the line was reassuring but routine. "Kids wander off sometimes," he said. "We'll send a patrol to check." But to Laura, this wasn't just kids wandering off. A mother's instinct screamed that her girls were in danger. The official report was filed that evening on July 17, 1985. Hannah Parker, age 13, and Sophie Parker, age 11, were listed as missing persons. The Springfield PD sprang into action, though the initial response treated it as a standard case. Officers canvassed the mall, interviewing shopkeepers and security guards. Mia, the school friend, came forward, describing the man with the Polaroid camera. She remembered his gray polo, his easy smile, and the way he'd seemed so normal. Emily and her friends reported the creepy teenager. His unsettling stare burned into their memories. Both descriptions were noted, but with no physical evidence, no screams, no struggle, no witnesses to an abduction. The police were grasping at straws. Search dogs were brought in by midnight, tracing the girl's scent from the ice cream parlor to the mall's west exit, then along Oak Street. The trail stopped cold at the edge of a parking lot, as if the sisters had simply dissolved into the summer air. The Parker family's world unraveled. Laura and Daniel took turns by the phone, praying for a call from the police or, God willing, from Hannah and Sophie themselves. Ethan blamed himself for not checking on them at the mall, his teenage bravado crumbling into guilt. The community rallied, plastering Springfield with missing posters. Hannah's wide smile and Sophie's bright eyes stared out from every storefront, every telephone pole. Volunteers scoured fields, checked alleyways, and searched the nearby creek, their flashlights slicing through the dark. A reward fund grew to $7,000, a fortune for a small town. But days turned into weeks and the leads dried up. The man with the camera and the creepy teen became fleeting shadows, their identities unknown. The police chased every tip, a sighting. In a nearby town, a suspicious car, but each one led nowhere. Then, 8 days after the disappearance, the phone rang at the Parker house. Laura lunged for it, her heart pounding. A low, distorted voice filled the line. "I have your girls," the caller said. $10,000, or you'll never see them again." Laura's knees buckled, but she held the receiver tight, begging to hear her daughter's voices. The caller gave instructions. "Leave the money in a duffel bag at a rest stop off Highway 22, no police." Then the line went dead. The Parkers were ready to pay anything, but the police, now monitoring the calls, hesitated. Was this a cruel prank or the real thing? They decided to set a trap, $50 in a bag, made to look like thousands. Officers staked out the rest stop, hidden in unmarked cars. Hours passed. No one came. At 2 a.m., the phone rang again, the same voice now furious. "Too many cops," he snarled. "You'll regret this." Daniel demanded proof. Let him speak to Hannah or Sophie. Silence. Then a click. The caller never reached out again. The ransom call broke what little hope the Parkers had left. Laura stopped sleeping, her eyes hollow from nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that morning. Daniel threw himself into the search, driving miles to chase rumors of sightings. The investigation grew massive, with state police and the FBI joining in. Divers searched the creek, helicopters swept the hills, and volunteers combed every inch of Springfield. The Polaroid man remained the prime suspect. His story about a magazine feature now seemed like a calculated lure. Sketches of him and the creepy teen were circulated, but no one came forward with a name. By August, the case was national news. The faces of Hannah and Sophie Parker etched into America's consciousness. Their birthdays passed in silence, the planned party replaced by candlelit vigils. The Parkers clung to hope, but a grim reality was settling in. Their girls might never come home. Months dragged on, and the investigation hit a wall. The police had interviewed hundreds, followed every lead, but found no trace of the sisters. The Polaroid man and the creepy teen faded into the case file, their sketches buried among thousands of pages. The Parkers' home, once filled with laughter, became a shrine to their missing daughters. Hannah's sketches pinned to the fridge, Sophie's favorite stuffed bear on her bed. Laura and Daniel refused to give up, but the weight of not knowing was crushing them. The community's fervor waned, and Springfield tried to move on, though the sisters' faces lingered on faded posters. The case grew cold, a haunting mystery that seemed destined to remain unsolved. But in 2013, 28 years later, a single piece of paper in a dusty file would change everything. A forgotten witness, dismissed decades ago, was about to speak again. And what he'd reveal would shake Springfield to its core. The disappearance of Hannah and Sophie Parker had haunted Springfield, Illinois for 28 years. Their faces, frozen in time on fading missing posters, were a constant reminder of a wound that never healed. By 2013, the case was a ghost story, a tragic mystery that seemed destined to remain unsolved. The original investigators had retired or passed away, their files gathering dust in the Springfield Police Department's archives. But one detective refused to let the case die. Sergeant Rachel Conway, a tenacious cold case specialist with a reputation for cracking the impossible, took on the Parker sisters file. She wasn't just chasing answers. She was driven by the faces of two little girls who deserved justice. What she uncovered in a forgotten report would blow the case wide open, revealing a darkness far worse than anyone in Springfield could have imagined. Conway's task was monumental, sifting through decades of documents, witness statements, and dead-end leads. The case file was a labyrinth, thousands of pages from frantic 1985 tip sheets to faded sketches of the Polaroid man and the creepy teen. But buried in the stack, a single report stopped her cold. Dated July 20th, 1985, it was a statement from a 19-year-old named Travis Lee Coleman, who claimed he'd seen something chilling at the Springfield Mall the day the sisters vanished. Coleman had told police he watched a man, the one with the Polaroid camera, lead two girls toward a gray van in the parking lot. He'd described the man's gray polo, his smooth-talking demeanor, and a detail that hadn't seemed significant at the time, a faint scar on his left hand. But when Coleman took a polygraph test in 1985, he failed miserably. His nervous demeanor and inconsistent answers led police to dismiss him as a liar, likely chasing the $7,000 reward. The report was marked unreliable and buried, forgotten. For nearly 3 decades, Conway's instincts told her to dig deeper. She tracked down a 1990 mugshot of Travis Coleman, now 47, and her breath caught. His features, lanky frame, dark hair, and a scar on his left hand, matched the sketch of the creepy teen from 1985, not the Polaroid man. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. Coleman wasn't just a witness. He might have been involved. Conway's research uncovered a disturbing truth. Coleman was no ordinary teenager in 1985. He'd grown into a career criminal, serving time in Missouri for assault and child endangerment. His record painted a picture of a predator. Multiple convictions for targeting young girls, using charm and manipulation to gain their trust. By 2013, he was incarcerated in a St. Louis prison, serving a 25-year sentence. Conway knew she had to confront him. If Coleman was the creepy teen, what did he know about the Polaroid man and the fate of Hannah and Sophie? On a crisp October morning in 2013, Conway and her partner, Detective Mark Ellis, walked into the St. Louis prison's interview room. Travis Coleman, now graying and weathered, sat across from them, his eyes guarded but sharp. Conway didn't waste time. "We're here about Hannah and Sophie Parker," she said, sliding their photos across the table. "Springfield, 1985. You know why we're here." Coleman's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said, his voice low. "Those girls, I saw what happened." His words sent a chill through the room. Conway leaned in, her voice steady but piercing. "Then tell us, Travis. Their parents are in their 70s, still waiting for answers. What did you see?" Coleman's story, delivered over a grueling 6-hour interrogation, would unravel a nightmare that had been buried for decades. Coleman claimed he was at the Springfield Mall that day, a 19-year-old drifter working odd jobs. He admitted to noticing Hannah and Sophie because of their laughter. It drew him in, he said, but not for innocent reasons. He'd been watching them when the Polaroid man approached, spinning his magazine story. Coleman recognized him immediately. Ronald "Ronnie" Hayes, a 42-year-old mechanic who ran a side hustle selling cameras at local flea markets. Hayes wasn't just a smooth talker. He was Coleman's cousin, a man with a dark reputation among their family. According to Coleman, Hayes had a history of luring kids with promises of fame or small rewards, using his cameras as props. That day, Coleman said, he saw Hayes lead the girls to his van, promising to show them more photo equipment. Coleman claimed he followed out of curiosity, not suspicion, and saw the girls climb into the van willingly. But when the door slid shut, he said, something felt wrong. He left the mall too scared to intervene. Conway wasn't buying the innocent bystander act. Coleman's record screamed predator, and his polygraph failure in 1985 suggested he was hiding more than he'd admitted. She pressed him, pointing out holes in his story. Why didn't he call the police? Why fail the polygraph? Coleman's composure cracked. Over the next several interviews spanning months, his story shifted. He admitted to being more than a witness. He'd helped Hayes that day, acting as a lookout while Hayes lured the girls, but he swore he didn't touch them, claiming Hayes drove off alone with Hannah and Sophie. Conway knew he was still holding back. She showed him the sisters' photos again, their young faces staring back. These girls deserve the truth, she said. You're running out of time to tell it. In March 2014, Coleman finally broke, revealing a story so horrific it left even seasoned detectives shaken. Coleman confessed that Hayes took the girls to a rundown farmhouse on the outskirts of Springfield, owned by their uncle Carl Hayes. The house, hidden behind overgrown fields, was a family hideout, a place where the Hayes men carried out their darkest acts. Coleman said he followed the van not out of concern but because Hayes promised him cash. In the farmhouse's basement, a damp, concrete room sealed with a rusted lock, Hannah and Sophie were held. Coleman's voice trembled as he described what he saw. The sisters, terrified, tied to chairs, their cries muffled. Hayes and Carl, he claimed, abused the girls over hours using the Polaroid camera to document their crimes. Coleman swore he didn't participate, only watched from the shadows, too cowardly to stop it. When it was over, he said, the girls were no longer moving. Hayes and Carl ordered him to help clean up. The sisters' bodies, Coleman admitted, were stuffed into garbage bags and taken away. He didn't know where, but he'd never forget the smell. Conway's team moved fast. In April 2014, they secured a warrant to search the farmhouse, now abandoned and crumbling. The basement matched Coleman's description perfectly. Concrete walls, a single entrance, a rusted lock still hanging on the door. Forensic experts descended, their lights revealing a scene out of a nightmare. Bloodstains, faint but unmistakable, covered the floor and walls, some splattered high enough to suggest unimaginable violence. Testing confirmed it was human blood, but 28 years of decay made DNA identification impossible. Still, the sheer volume of evidence corroborated Coleman's story. The team found more. A Polaroid photo, faded but chilling, tucked behind a loose brick. It showed two young girls, their faces blurred but hauntingly familiar, bound and staring into the camera. Conway's heart sank. She knew she was looking at Hannah and Sophie. The investigation shifted to the bodies. Coleman's confession pointed to a remote property in southern Illinois, near the Shawnee National Forest owned by the Hayes family. In June 2014, Conway's team, along with state police, descended on the site, a wooded, hilly area far from prying eyes. Coleman had described a fire pit where Hayes and Carl burned evidence, including the garbage bags. Excavations uncovered fragments of horror, charred bone shards, a child's bracelet melted at the edges, and scraps of fabric that matched Sophie's favorite sundress, described by Laura Parker decades ago. The remains were too degraded for DNA, but the items were damning. A cousin, Ellen Hayes, came forward, her voice shaking as she recalled a night in 1985 when Ronnie and Carl returned to the property with heavy bags, reeking of something foul. She'd seen them feed a fire that burned for 2 days, the smoke thick and acrid, choking the air. The evidence was mounting, but Conway needed more to tie it all together. She tracked down Ronald Hayes, now 70, living in a trailer park in Missouri. His rap sheet was long: petty theft, fraud, and a 1990s arrest for molestation that never stuck. In a tense July 2014 interview, Hayes denied everything, claiming he'd never been to the Springfield Mall. But when Conway showed him the faded Polaroid, his face went pale. He stammered, insisting it was a misunderstanding, but his hands shook. Meanwhile, Carl Hayes, the uncle, had died in 2005, his secrets buried with him. Conway's team leaned on Coleman, who was now cooperating fully, facing the reality of life in prison. In a final interview, he admitted to helping load the bags into Hayes's van, knowing what was inside. He claimed Hayes and Carl burned the bodies to destroy evidence, believing the remote forest would hide their crimes forever. By January 2015, prosecutors had enough. Travis Coleman was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, with charges of kidnapping and sexual assault added. Ronald Hayes was charged as the primary perpetrator, accused of orchestrating the abduction and murders. The case against Carl Hayes, deceased, was noted but unprosecutable. The investigation had been exhaustive: 12,000 hours, 40 warrants, 80 interviews across 3 states. In September 2017, 32 years after Hannah and Sophie vanished, a Springfield courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Laura and Daniel Parker, now in their late 70s, sat in the front row, their faces etched with decades of grief. Coleman, 51, pleaded guilty to accessory to murder, admitting his role in the cover-up but denying direct involvement in the killings. He was sentenced to 40 years, ensuring he'd die behind bars. Hayes, defiant to the end, pleaded not guilty, but was convicted on all counts. At 74, he received 2 life sentences without parole. The courtroom was heavy with emotion as Laura Parker stood to speak. Her voice broke as she described the hole left by her daughter's absence, the birthdays missed, the laughter silenced. "We'll never hold them again," she said, "but today we have justice." The judge's gavel fell, closing a chapter that had tormented Springfield for decades. The sisters' remains were never fully recovered, leaving Laura and Daniel without a grave to visit. But the truth, however horrific, gave them a measure of peace. The Polaroid, the bloodstains, the bone fragments, all painted a picture of unimaginable evil hidden in a quiet suburb. The case changed Springfield forever, shattering its innocence and sparking new child safety measures across Illinois. Hannah and Sophie Parker were just 2 girls who wanted ice cream and a fun day at the mall. Their story reminds us that evil can lurk in the most ordinary places and that justice, no matter how long delayed, can still prevail. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.